Chapter 11 is called The Science of Bluffing. Still within the context of deception, we look at bluffing from a probabilistic perspective. Bluffing can entail representing a higher or lower hand than you actually have, and can be either offensive or defensive in nature. We will explore several bluffing techniques, noting their defensibility and probability of success. Let's begin with slow playing a monster. This bluff is often seen after the flop shows a high pair or three of a kind, possibly giving someone trips or quads. So this bluff represents a low hand for offensive purposes. Coming out betting right away is sure to frighten off many of your opponents, so the idea is to check once or even twice, hoping that someone either makes a hand or decides to bluff at the pot. In this example, you've been dealt ace-king unsuited on the button. When the flop gives you a full house, aces full of kings, you currently have the nut hand, but your biggest problem will be making it pay off. When everyone checks to you, if you come out betting, it's possible they'll interpret it as an attempt to steal the pot, but it's also possible that everyone will simply fold. So you decide to check. When the turn card gives the board 3 hearts, you still have the nut hand. If someone bets, you'll just call, trying not to alarm anyone. And when the river card is a 4th heart, it's extremely likely that multiple players will have made flushes. Now is the time to begin betting aggressively. Consider for a moment the story that's being told by this particular example. By becoming aggressive after the board shows 4 hearts, we're attempting to misdirect the attention of our opponents away from the possibility of our having made a full house and toward the very believable story that we've made a flush. The best magicians employ misdirections for this very same reason, because it tells a believable story. In our case, we'll be hoping that 1 or 2 players hold high hearts. Whoever holds the queen of hearts will almost certainly come out betting, and when we raise from the button, that player is very likely to re-raise. By employing misdirection to tell a good story, we are enticing our opponents to ignore any warning signs that we've made a better hand, and to believe that they hold the winning hand. The most successful bluffs are often those that tell the most believable stories. So always be alert for opportunities to misdirect your opponents, enticing them to attack you when you hold the best hand. Here's one more example of using misdirection while slow playing a monster. Assume that you're in the big blind with the king, queen of hearts, and the flop comes 9, 10, jack of hearts. You flopped a straight flush, and you want it to pay off. So again, you decide to slow play, and you check or call until your opponents have time to catch up. An 8 of spades on the turn simply means that someone may now have made a straight, but you continue checking or calling. However, when an ace comes on the river, you come out betting as though you've paired aces. If someone has made a straight, he'll likely call at least, and if someone has made a flush, he may raise. You may even get calls from players holding 2 pair, all because you were able to sell your bluff by telling a good story. Buying the button is another common bluff that works best when you're in late position but not actually on the button. Here's an example of when this bluff is used for defensive purposes. Assume that you've called the big blind with a 10-7 of hearts, the so-called suited Broadway connectors with 2 ranks of separation. Then the flop comes 9 of hearts, 3 of hearts, 2 of hearts. You have flopped a 5 flush and will want to bet. But when an earlier player bets, you decide to raise. With this bluff, you're thinking ahead to the next 2 cards. If either of them is another heart, there's a good chance that someone will make a higher flush. After all, the ace, king, queen, and jack of hearts are still unaccounted for. You're not worried about slow playing this hand. By raising after the flop, you're advertising to everyone that you've made your flush. You hope to cause all the opponents between you and the button to fold, so that if either the turn or river card is another heart, you have the option of checking to avoid being check-raised. Semi-bluffing with the expectation of improving should be an old favorite by now. This bluff is used when you've flopped a major milestone to a premium hand, and there are at least 3 players in the hand. Here's an example. Assume that you've been dealt Queen 10 of hearts, and the flop comes 9 of hearts, Ace of clubs, 2 of hearts, giving you a 4 flush. You have approximately a 33% chance of making your flush by the river. If there are at least 3 players in the hand, you and 2 opponents, you have the pot odds to bet or raise, so choose to raise. This bluff will succeed approximately once in 3 attempts, and any time there are more than 3 players in the hand, this bluff will make a profit. Semi-bluffing to defend a weak kicker is similar to the previous example, but much more daring. You still have an expectation of improving, but even if you do, your chances of winning are much reduced. Assume that the bluffer has been dealt Queen 2 unsuited in the big blind. When no one raises, he gets to see the flop for free, which comes 8, Jack, Queen, all different suits, called a rainbow, giving him top pair. But how should he bet? True, he has top pair, but his kicker is so bad, if he fails to improve, he'll likely lose to someone else holding a queen but with a better kicker. The thought of passively calling all the way to the showdown is unpleasant, so when the turn card threatens a straight, the bluffer decides to take the initiative. He comes out betting, representing that straight. This sudden change in momentum is frequently enough to cause anyone holding just 1 pair to fold. But will someone holding 2 pair fold? And has one of his opponents truly made that straight? These are very big unknowns. In any event, the bluffer does have top pair, so at least he has some winning chances. Assume that you have a calling hand, but you're not confident of winning. You can either fold, according to Sun Tzu's teachings, or you can try to gather more information. Here's an example. You've been dealt King Jack unsuited on the button, and the flop comes Jack 7-7 rainbow, giving you 2 pair. You decide to claim the board's 7s as your own, but before you can act, an earlier player comes out betting. You want to know whether he really holds a 7, so you raise. If he folds, you know he was bluffing. But what if he calls? All he's really told you is that he has more than a worthless hand. And if he re-raises, he's telling you he does hold a 7. The main problem with this scenario is that poker players are notorious liars. You can't trust anything they tell you. But here's a somewhat better scenario. Again, assume you've been dealt King Jack offsuit, and the flop comes Jack 7-7 rainbow, giving you 2 pair. But this time you're first to act, and you come out betting. There are 2 callers, either of whom could hold a 7. So when the turn card fails to improve your hand, you check. At this point you've relinquished control and await the action of your callers. If they both check, you might want to bet on the river. But if one of them bets, you must decide how to proceed. If you call, you may simply be giving away your chips, but at least you won't get check raised at the showdown. If one of your opponents raises on the turn or river, you have a tough decision to make. You risk being taken for a very unpleasant ride if the 2 opponents get into a raising war. Now let's examine claiming the board's pair as your own. Assume again that the bluffer has been dealt Queen 2 offsuit in the big blind. No one raises, so he gets to see the flop for free, which this time comes 8-8 Queen, giving him 2 pair, top pair plus the board's pair of 8s. But is it safe to claim the board's pair as his own? After all, anyone holding an 8 now has made trips. As it turns out, yes, it's usually safe. This chart depicts the percentage of hands in which some rank is dealt. In our example, the rank is 8. We see that all the 8s remain in the deck undealt in 9% of all hands dealt. In 31% of the hands, only 1 8 is dealt, and in 38% of the hands, 2 8s are dealt. Only 22% of the hands will contain more than 2 8s, that is 19% plus 3%. From this we can conclude that 2 or more 8s are dealt in 60 out of 100 hands. So let's examine just those 60 hands containing 2 or more 8s. Of these, 2 8s are dealt in 38 hands, or 63%. Thus you'll be safe in claiming the board's 2 8s in almost 2/3 of all hands in which the board shows a pair of 8s. So you'll have a break-even point of 1.5. Note, however, that anyone else holding a queen has just made the same 2 pair as you. So from a pot odds perspective, this effectively raises your break-even point. But does anyone else hold a queen? According to the chart, you'll hold the only queen 31% of the time. And note that when more than 2 8s were dealt, in some of those hands, the 8 will already have been folded. These two factors combine to push your break-even point back down again. It's difficult to say exactly where it is, but it's probably less than 3 and more than 1, so 2 makes a good estimate of your break-even point. So is it safe to claim the board's pair as your own? Yes. You can expect this bluff to succeed twice as many times as it fails. But because it will often result in a split pot, your profits will be closer to break-even. Thinking defensively, be aware that more players in the hand implies an increased threat from that 3rd or 4th 8. Also, should the board now pair again, say jacks, chances are very good that someone has made a full house, and suddenly your 2 pair don't look so promising. Thus, this bluff works best against only 1 or 2 opponents. Finally, the more board cards above 8 increases the number of 2 pair that could beat yours. This time you hold pocket kings when the board flops 8-8 queen. Now you have an overpair, and if you can claim the board's pair of 8s, you have a dominant 2 pair. As before, this bluff should succeed twice as many times as it fails, but you are much less likely to split the pot. It should therefore be very profitable. You still need to defend this hand from many of the same threats we discussed in the previous version, but all in all, the overpair scenario is a very attractive bluff. To many poker players, bluffing means holding a worthless hand and raising like a maniac, starting pre-flop and continuing all the way to the showdown. The bluffer is, in essence, betting that none of his opponents will make a hand. If we assume that his opponents are all attempting to draw to a premium hand from a major milestone, we can calculate his chances of success. We know that one such opponent will succeed about once in 3 attempts, so the bluffer has a 66% probability of success. Because his break-even point is 1.5, he is justified in raising to any amount when heads up against a single drawing opponent. Against 2 drawing opponents, his chances shrink to just 44%. This implies a break-even point of slightly over 2, so again he has the pot odds to carry off his bluff. But as the number of drawing opponents increases, the bluffer's chances decrease, until there are 5 opponents in the hand, at which point it becomes a bad bet. Remember, however, that his opponents don't necessarily need to make a premium hand in order to call. Any of them could call with just 1 or 2 pair. So unless you truly don't care whether you get caught bluffing, raising with a worthless hand should be used very sparingly. Here's a more rational approach. Assume that you've been dealt 7-2 offsuit in the big blind. When no one raises, you get to see the flop for free, which comes ace, king, ace. Because no one raised pre-flop, you assume that no one holds an ace. So you come out betting, hoping to scare everyone into folding right away. And as we've already seen, claiming the board's pair should succeed 2/3 of the time. If anyone calls, you need to decide how to bet on the turn and river. Do you continue the bluff, or do you surrender the lead? It may come as a surprise that bluffs also need defending. But imagine an extreme case. You were claiming the board's pair as your own. You hold Queen 10, and the flop came 8-8 Queen. But then the turn and river cards were both aces. Will you continue pretending to have the best hand? Pulling the trigger on the river may be very difficult indeed. So decide ahead of time how far you're willing to continue your bluff. Will being caught bluffing at the showdown have sufficient advertising value? Only you can decide this. Now let's review the bluffs covered in Chapter 11. Raising with a worthless hand. Use this bluff very sparingly, if at all. Assuming you hold something like Ace-King unsuited, against only drawing hands, this bluff is a good bet, until there are 5 or more players in the hand. Fishing for information works better in no-limit hold'em, but when the bets are limited, fishing yields inconsistent results. Semi-bluffing to defend a weak kicker is a daring bluff, not for the faint of heart, and it depends on the board offering you an opportunity of misrepresenting your hand as a premium hand. But even if this bluff fails, because the bluffer also holds top pair, he still has some winning chances. Slow playing a monster. While it's nice to be in the position of needing to hide a monster hand from your opponents, it doesn't occur all that frequently. But it's certainly nice when it happens. Buying the button is typically a defensive bluff, aimed at seeing the turn card for half price, in case it doesn't improve your hand. But if it does improve your hand, you can simply continue betting aggressively. Claiming the board's pair as your own has excellent winning chances, but it's most effective when you're seated in late position and hold an overpair. And when you occasionally make your set, giving you a full house, it makes you look like the luckiest donkey on the planet. And finally, semi-bluffing with the expectation of improving to a premium hand gets my highest score, simply because I use it more than any other bluff. It should become such a common feature in your play that you cease to even think of it as bluffing. It should simply be thought of as the correct way to draw to a premium hand. And always be alert for opportunities to misdirect your opponents, diverting their attention away from the real threat to help you sell your bluff. In general, the better story your bluff can tell, the more profitable it will be. Hello, this is Tyson Wood. Our goal here at Strategic Hold'em is simple, to help you play smarter poker. You can help us spread the word by sharing our web address with a friend. And you can help us keep the lights on at Strategic Hold'em by making a donation. We plan to continue our research and release more poker tutorials as new results come available. If you have any topic suggestions, please send them to feedback@strategichold'em.com. All your comments are welcome. We'd particularly like to hear about your most successful bluffing tactics. On behalf of the entire team at Strategic Hold'em, good luck and good hunting.